Chosen one, a public narrative is being constructed around your silence and the atmospheric pressure is rising. Someone is currently assembling a crowd, weaponizing their supposed ignorance to paint you as the villain of a story they helped write. The stage is set for a confrontation where a whole community is demanding answers from you right now. By the end of this, you will realize that their confusion is a choice and your silence is your strength. Before we go anywhere, let us agree on something. Every great con has a setup. Every manipulation has a first move, and the first move in this particular game is the oldest one in existence. Play the victim before anyone else can tell the real version of events. The person at the center of this, the parent, the grandparent, the elder who was supposed to be your safe place, your foundation, your first example of what love looks like in practice, has decided that the best defense is a wounded offense. The calculation runs like this: if the performance of confusion is convincing enough, if enough witnesses can be gathered, if the grief looks real enough from the outside, then the conversation never has to reach the part where real answers are required. The question, "Why didn't you tell me?" is not being asked because the answer is genuinely wanted. It is being asked because the act of asking shifts the blame. It says the problem was your silence, not what created that silence. It says if only you had spoken up, everything would have been different. It says this is on you, and here is what makes this so effective at making you second-guess yourself. There is just enough truth in it to stick, because you did go quiet at some point. You stopped bringing things forward. You stopped reaching, stopped explaining, stopped hoping that what you were putting down would be picked up. You built distance. You learned to carry things alone. That is true, but here is the question that nobody in that assembled crowd is asking. Why? Why did you go quiet? Why did someone with your depth, your emotional intelligence, your genuine capacity for connection, decide that this particular relationship was not a place where honesty was safe? That is the real question, and that is exactly where we are going. Let us slow all the way down on this question, because most people hear it and feel something cave in their chest immediately. That caving sensation is the trap working exactly as it was designed to work. On the surface, "Why didn't you tell me?" sounds like an open invitation. It sounds like someone saying, "Come in, talk to me. I am ready to hear whatever you have to say." But watch what it actually does the moment you move toward that invitation. The second you begin answering, the second you start explaining why you went quiet, why communication broke down, why you stopped reaching, you have done something very specific. You have stepped out of your own position of clarity and into a frame that was built specifically for you. Inside that frame, the rules are already set. You become the one who owes an explanation, and the person asking becomes the one who deserves one. That framing did not happen by accident. Here is what the question never asks: what did I do that made honesty feel dangerous to you? It never asks, where was I when you needed me, and why was I not present? It never asks, what part did my own behavior play in the silence between us? Those would be honest questions, the kind a person asks when they genuinely want to understand how a relationship fractured. But those questions point the spotlight inward, and the inward direction is the one place the spotlight is never allowed to move. Instead, the question lands entirely on you, on your silence, on your choice to stop communicating. The entire focus becomes the silence itself rather than the conditions that made your silence the only reasonable response available. The conversation becomes about the fact that you pulled away, not about what you were pulling away from. You are the kind of person who will actually audit yourself. You will ask whether you could have done more, tried harder, found better words, chosen a better moment. That capacity for honest self-examination is one of your greatest strengths. It is also exactly what is being counted on right now. Your self-awareness is being used to produce just enough self-doubt that everything gets murky, that you start wondering whether the breakdown really was a failure of communication after all, whether the right words at the right time could have changed the entire outcome. The silence was not a failure of communication. It was a response to a failure of connection. Connection requires two people. One person cannot hold it open indefinitely while the other keeps letting it close. The question is a trap, and you do not have to walk into it. You can see it clearly for what it is, a reframe designed to keep the focus on your behavior and away from theirs, and you can choose not to engage with it on those terms, not out of bitterness, not out of defensiveness, out of the deep settled clarity of someone who has already done the inner work and has no interest in being pulled backward by someone who has not. That is not coldness, that is sovereignty. If these words stirred your consciousness, hype this video to help more chosen ones awaken to this. There was a season, you know exactly which one, when things were genuinely hard, not inconvenient, not uncomfortable, hard in the way that lives in your body, hard in the way where every option in front of you is a bad one, hard in the way that most people around you did not fully see because you had already learned not to make it too visible. And during that season, the person at the center of this situation was not absent. They were close enough to see the outline of what was happening, close enough that genuine attention would have made your situation undeniable, but genuine attention was not given. Maybe the looking away was unintentional, a case of someone too absorbed in their own world to register what was standing right in front of them. But here is the harder possibility, the one that takes more courage to sit with. The looking away was a deliberate choice. The minimizing was a choice. The subject changes, the pivots to their own experience, the dismissive reassurances that you would be fine. None of that happened by accident. It was easier. It was more comfortable. Showing up for you in that season would have required rearranging something in themselves, sacrificing something they were not willing to sacrifice, so they chose not to. Now hold on to what I am about to say, because we will return to it. The same person who looked away while you struggled is now standing in front of a gathered crowd, struggling themselves. They are collecting sympathy like currency, living in the poverty of a relationship they allowed to go dry through years of neglect. They are experiencing something very close to what they once watched you experience, and the part that should make you breathe out instead of ache. They still do not have the self-awareness to see the connection between the two. Look, you already know the attacks weren't random, and if you're paying attention, you can feel it. Their walls are closing in. You've also noticed something else. A lot of Chosen One channels on YouTube have gone quiet, videos removed, voices pushed off the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice, so let's talk about what we're doing about it. That's why I built Destiny Engine, and when you join, you're not just supporting your favorite channels, you're also fueling your own rise. It's a 360 win. It generates personalized sequences that help you rewire betrayal into transcendence, turn isolation into sacred power, and transform their downfall into your rise. We are using the Dark Elite's own weapons against them, taking their declassified consciousness technology that programmed competition and scarcity and repurposing it to serve cooperative intelligence. The beauty is, you don't even have to lift a finger. You put on the headphones, press play, and your subconscious is rewired while your enemies collapse under the weight of their own lies. This is why I created it in the beginning, so everything they did to break you becomes fuel for your purpose. The collective upgrade is underway. Start your Destiny Engine for $7 today and watch divine justice accelerate in your life. Link in the description. Let us look at what was actually known. You remember those moments. You worked for something. You reached something that cost you real effort. And you looked up for the one face that was supposed to reflect your joy back at you and found something flat there instead. Distracted, present in the physical sense, but somewhere else entirely in the sense that mattered. You felt it every single time. Even when you told yourself you were being too sensitive. Even when you folded the feeling down and kept moving, the way you always did, you felt the hollow in the middle of what should have been genuine warmth, and it was never just once, it was a pattern. Milestone after milestone. You kept waiting for the energy to arrive, for the kind of warmth and pride that someone who genuinely loves you radiates without needing to be coached into it. It never arrived, not fully, not consistently, not in the way you deserved. Here is why that happened. At the center of that person's world was a deep need to be the brightest presence in every space they occupied, not necessarily with full conscious awareness, not with deliberate malice on any particular day, but as a structural feature of how they moved through life. Your light outshining theirs came at a personal cost to them, and rather than examining why someone else's success activated their insecurity, they handled it the way people with low emotional intelligence have always handled it. They quietly dimmed you, not dramatically, with plausible deniability, a comment that landed with an edge, a response that never came when it should have, a moment that belonged to you that somehow became about them, a celebration that left you feeling inexplicably like you were performing for an empty auditorium. So you stopped bringing your wins forward, you stopped bringing your struggles too. Over time you had learned that the response to both was the same, insufficient, conditional, not quite what you needed, and you filed that understanding away quietly, without a declaration, without a scene. You simply adjusted your expectations and kept moving. That adjustment is what is now being called your silence. This is where the stakes of the whole situation rise significantly, because this is not only about one difficult person, this is about who you were required to become because of what you were handed, and what that becoming has cost and produced in equal measure. You grew up faster than you should have. That is not a metaphor, it is a lived reality. When the adults in your life were emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or more absorbed in their own needs than yours, you did not get the luxury of simply being young. You became something else entirely, someone perpetually alert, perpetually competent, constantly reading the temperature of every interaction you entered, anticipating moods, managing dynamics that were never your responsibility to manage. You became the most capable person in spaces where you should have been the most protected. Now here is the part that requires you to actually sit with it, the very capacities that were forged in you through that environment, your emotional intelligence, your ability to see beneath the surface of people and situations, your depth, your self-sufficiency, your refusal to collapse under pressure. Those are the exact qualities that are fueling your growth right now. And the person out there performing grief and assembling an audience is now trying to stand next to those qualities and claim credit for them. They tried to keep you small, and in the specific process of surviving their smallness, you became something they cannot contain or define. Think about that carefully. The neglect, the emotional unavailability, the forcing you to figure everything out without support, all of that became the forge. You did not grow in spite of what happened. You grew through it, because having to raise yourself taught you to know yourself in ways that people who were always carried never had to learn. You are not a victim of that history. You are the product of it, a clear-eyed, grounded, powerful product who looked at what was handed to them and decided to build something extraordinary from the raw material. The way a person responds to losing someone reveals who they actually are, not the version they present for public sympathy, but the real architecture of their character underneath all the performance. Genuine grief turns inward. It asks hard questions in private. It wonders what was missed, what was not seen, what was done or left undone that contributed to the distance. Genuine grief is humble and quiet and willing to do the uncomfortable work of honest self-examination. What you are watching right now is the opposite of that. What you are watching is a display that requires an audience in order to function, a performance that escalates every time the previous round of validation wears off. Notice this especially. The question, "Why didn't you tell me?" is being broadcast everywhere except directly to you. It is being asked to people who cannot possibly answer it because they were not present for any of it, because they have only been given the curated version with the key evidence carefully removed. A person who genuinely wants answers goes to the source. They make themselves vulnerable. They show up directly and say, "I know I may not like what I hear, but I am asking you anyway." That requires real courage. That requires setting down the ego long enough to actually receive something true. That direct conversation has not happened. What has been constructed instead is a chamber of agreement, people nodding along, people confirming that nothing could have been done differently, people reassuring that the love was always there and the loss is completely inexplicable. But here is what no amount of outside agreement can actually provide: quiet, because underneath the performance, the real knowing is still present. On some level, the level that operates below justification and narrative, the truth of what happened is known. The specific moments of looking away are known. The pattern of choosing personal comfort over your well-being is known. And no volume of external validation can fully silence that internal knowledge. Your distance is not the source of that discomfort. Your distance is the mirror that reflects it back. And some people will destroy every mirror they own before they choose to face what the reflection shows. Think about the consistent pattern of moments, not one isolated incident, but the accumulation of them, when something real was happening in your life and you looked up waiting for a genuine response, not a perfect response, just a real one. The kind of response an emotionally present person gives without needing to be prompted or coached. It did not come. What came instead was something that looked adjacent to support, but landed slightly wrong every time. A comparison that did not need to be drawn. An observation with a small edge embedded in it. A redirect toward their own experience that quietly relocated your moment somewhere that was no longer about you. Or sometimes nothing at all, the particular recognizable silence of someone who received the signal clearly and simply decided not to respond to it. You noticed every single time. You are the kind of person who notices, but noticing is not the same as naming, and naming is not the same as doing something with what you have named. For a long time you did neither, because looking at the full picture directly was too painful. Accepting the full picture meant accepting that the person who was supposed to be your foundation had never been stable ground, that the warmth you sometimes felt was real but conditional, that the love came with fine print you were never shown up front. So you filed the noticings away one by one, each small enough to explain away in isolation, but the accumulated weight of them grew. And eventually, without a single dramatic final moment, without anything obvious enough to point to as clean evidence, you simply ran out of the capacity to keep reaching towards someone who kept stepping back. That is when the quiet came, not as a punishment designed to wound, not as a calculated strategy. You went quiet because the energy required to keep trying had grown greater than your capacity to spend it, and your energy finally had somewhere better to go. You chose yourself. After everything, you chose yourself. Now that person stands before a gathered crowd, asking why you never talked to them, why, if there was something wrong, you did not simply bring it forward, and the full, true answer lives inside every single one of those filed away moments. It lives in every time you opened your mouth to speak and then closed it again because you already knew how the landing would feel. It lives in every quiet hope you released without ceremony because holding it had become more expensive than letting it go. You did not fail to communicate. You communicated constantly through your presence, your patience, your effort, the sheer length of your staying. Every chance you gave past the reasonable point was communication. Every return when leaving would have been easier was communication. All of it was speaking. All of it was heard. The receiving and the responding were simply two different choices, and only one of them was ever made. So when the question arrives, and it will keep arriving, you can let it sit without answering. You do not need to produce the evidence. You do not need to justify a decision that was already earned many times over. What you owe belongs entirely to your forward life now. This is the turning point, and it did not look the way turning points are supposed to look. There was no dramatic final confrontation. There was no scene where everything got said out loud and the credits rolled. Real turning points almost never look like that. They are quieter, more private, more devastating in their simplicity. There was a moment, you can locate it if you sit with it, when something inside you let go. Not in anger, not even fully in grief, though grief was woven through it, in clarity. The last reserve of "let me try one more time" simply released. And in that releasing, something that had been locked in place for a very long time began to open. Here is what happens when you stop pouring energy into a source that has never returned what you put in. That energy does not disappear, it redirects. It becomes available to you for your actual life, your real work, the version of yourself that was always present underneath all the adapting and shrinking and endlessly managing. You started to grow, not the performed kind of growth, not the kind that needs witnesses, the real kind. The kind that expands into the actual size of who you are when no one is standing over you, insisting you take up less space. The weight you had been carrying, the exhausting one-sidedness of a relationship that only ever moved in a single direction, started transforming into something else. The way sustained pressure produces something harder and more valuable than what it started with. The way a person who has carried something genuinely heavy and chosen to set it down does not walk away empty. They walk away knowing exactly what they are capable of, and that knowledge belongs to them permanently. That is the real turning point. Not when you were at your lowest, when you finally found yourself. Now the full picture becomes visible. You built something real. You healed something real. You created a life that is genuinely, undeniably yours. And that life became visible in the way that meaningful growth always does. The kind of visible that travels, that reaches people through networks and word of mouth, the quiet visibility of someone who is clearly and unmistakably different from who they used to be. Word got back. And something tightened in the person who received that news, a recalibration, because the working assumption had been that you would struggle in the absence of that relationship, that the distance would cost you more than it cost them, that eventually you would return and confirm that you needed what had been withheld, that the reunion would become a moment where the patient, forgiving one was vindicated. You did not return, you built forward instead. And now that the assumed outcome has not materialized, a person who has never developed the tools to sit with an outcome they did not plan for does not know what to do except reach for the audience, find more witnesses, and restart the performance. Understand this precisely. What is being mourned right now is not your presence. What is being mourned is relevance. Your growth is a space the performer wants to be seen standing inside. Your success is something they want proximity to. And the question, "Why didn't you tell me I would have been there?" is the only entrance available to them. Because as long as the conversation stays focused on your silence, it never has to turn toward their character and the choices that character made. This was never about missing who you are. This has always been about missing what you now represent. Let us look directly at the thing that still pulls at you, because it deserves honest examination rather than dismissal. Even after everything, a part of you holds a quiet hope, not a naive hope, not an uninformed one, but the persistent, very human hope that maybe this time something has genuinely shifted, that the performance contains actual grief, that the question is a real question, that if you opened the door just slightly, you would find something new and different waiting on the other side. Take that hope seriously. Dismissing it does not make it disappear. Dismissing it just sends it underground, where you cannot examine it, and it continues to operate without your awareness. So examine it directly. Imagine you respond. Imagine you offer what is being performed as a desperate need. You find the words, you say the things that have lived inside you. You give the full honest account of what it felt like, what it cost, what you needed and never received. What happens next? Not in the ideal version. In the realistic version, the one informed by everything you already know about how this dynamic actually operates. Your explanation gets processed through the same filter. Everything has always been processed through. The parts that are convenient receive acknowledgement. The parts that require real accountability get deflected, minimized, or turned back around somehow. Some portion of what you said gets reported to others in a version that no longer sounds like anything you actually said. The conversation that was supposed to produce understanding becomes somehow about managing the feelings your explanation created. The focus shifts away from you and back to them. your hard-won distance compresses back to zero, your clarity gets muddied, your peace gets disturbed, and you find yourself back inside the dynamic you spent so much of yourself escaping, not because you made the wrong choice in trying, but because patterns do not change without the person inside them choosing to change, and choosing to change requires exactly the kind of honest self-examination they are currently building an entire public performance to avoid. This is not about punishing anyone. It is not about withholding forgiveness as a weapon. It is about having enough respect for what you have built and for how much it cost you to build it, to protect it with the same seriousness you used to construct it. Choosing your peace is not the smaller choice. Walking forward instead of backward is not coldness or cruelty. It is the most honest thing you can do for your own life, and in the long run, it is the only version of you that has any real use to anyone, including yourself. You earned this ground. Keep it. Let us talk about what was actually built inside you, not as comfort, as fact. The emotional intelligence you carry right now was paid for in full. It was purchased with the currency of an environment where you had to read people before they could hurt you, where you had to assess the temperature of every interaction before stepping into it, where understanding what was actually happening beneath the surface of things was not a luxury but a survival requirement. That is not a wound you are still carrying. That is a capability other people invest enormous time and effort trying to develop, and you have it at a depth most people never reach. Your self-sufficiency was also paid for. Being left to figure things out without support meant you actually figured them out. You did not wait for someone to hand you the answer or carry you to the next step. You built the capacity. You proved to yourself repeatedly what you were capable of when the support system was absent. Your clarity, the specific, grounded, hard-to-rattle clarity you carry about who you are and what you will and will not accept, that was earned too. It was paid for by every experience they now claim they knew nothing about, by every moment of being overlooked and still choosing yourself anyway, by the long, unglamorous, unwitnessed process of deciding that your own standards for your own life matter more than the comfort of fitting inside someone else's limited version of you. The attempt was to shape you into something that would stay manageable, and in the specific friction of refusing that shape, in all the time spent not fitting, not complying, not shrinking into the convenient version of yourself, you became someone who cannot be managed, someone who does not need permission to know their own value, someone who does not require outside confirmation to move forward. You are building right now, every day, quietly and consistently, while the performance continues somewhere behind the boundary you placed between you and it. You are becoming something that does not need their validation, does not need the crowd to agree that you were right, does not need anyone's acknowledgement to keep moving in the direction you have chosen. You already know you were right. You knew it before you could fully articulate it. You know it now in a way that lives in your bones and does not shake. Your life is the answer to the question being asked about you. Your growth is the answer. The peace you carry, the specific hard-to-explain peace of someone who chose truth over familiarity and sovereignty over belonging at any cost, that is the complete answer. You do not need to deliver it in words. Let it speak for itself. We began with your name being said out loud in public. We began with a question, "Why didn't you tell me?" hanging in the air like smoke that would not clear. We began with a performance already in progress, an audience already assembled, a case already being constructed against your silence. Now we close. But not where the performer expects this to close, not with you explaining yourself, walking back through a boundary you established for very good reasons, or providing the closure that is being performed as a desperate and urgent need. We close somewhere they did not account for. We close with you, not the version of you that was required to be manageable, not the version that absorbed the chaos and maintained the peace by making yourself smaller so that someone else could feel bigger, not the version that was simultaneously too much and never quite enough. The real version, the one that was always present underneath all of it, the one that refused to be extinguished even when every condition around it said that extinction was the likely outcome. Here is the truth about why you did not tell them. You told them everything. You told them when you reached out and received nothing back. You told them when you achieved something and received flatness where genuine warmth belonged. You told them when you were struggling and received minimization in return. You told them through the language of someone who needed to feel genuinely safe and kept discovering that safety in that relationship was conditional. You told them through your presence, your patience, your willingness to stay far past the point where staying made any reasonable sense. All of that was telling. All of it was as clear and as loud as honesty can be. And all of it was received. It was simply never honored. That is not your failure. You cannot make yourself visible to someone who has decided not to see you. You cannot reach someone who has chosen not to be reached. You did your part. You did it well past the point most people would have stopped. And when you finally, with full clarity, full grief and full acceptance of what was actually true, stepped back from something that was never going to return what it cost you, that was not giving up, that was the most honest decision you have ever made. That was the final act in a long series of self-respecting choices that built the person you are right now. The community demanding answers does not know what it is looking at. It sees someone who walked away, but you know what actually happened. You looked at something that had been burning long before you arrived, and after too long spent trying to save it, you finally understood that some things have to come all the way down before something genuinely new can be built in their place. You did not start that fire. You could not stop it. And the most honest thing, the most self-respecting thing was to walk out and build on clear ground, and then you built, with your own tools, with the hard-won capabilities of someone who walked through that particular fire and came out the other side knowing, with absolute certainty, exactly what they are made of. That is what you did. The question was, why didn't you tell me? Here is the answer. You already did. Not always in words, but in every moment of your effort, your presence, your patience, and ultimately your departure. You said everything there was to say. You said it with your whole life. Now close this chapter, chosen one. You have a life to live, and it is already more extraordinary than they will ever understand.